What's happening, hardscapers? Today we're lifting and relaying a fire pit. Let's get into this. Fixing this fire pit, you can see a lot of the gaps have increased. You can even see it in here, all along this. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna pry each piece off. Hopefully they don't break, because that's a possibility, depending on how well it was glued. And then we're going to re-level and tighten up the inside. You can even see they're having trouble with how much of a gap there is here, that the glass that they have for media for the fire pit just keeps falling down. So we're going to tighten up these ones. That should give us a better radius to tighten up the top caps and make them nice and level. So that's what we're doing today. Whenever I am taking apart something that needs to be put back together exactly as it is, I like to just put it aside in the same configuration as I'm pulling it apart. So you can see here, I'm just keeping everything in the exact same order. And then I am taking apart the blocks, slowly prying on the caps because I do not want to break them. So I am just hammering my chisel underneath that cap and slowly prying up on it. I'll take apart the glue off of the caps, underneath the caps, before I go ahead and adhere those back on. And now that I'm on the final base course, I'm not actually going to take all the base blocks out. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out one piece at a time. So I find the highest and most level block that there is, and that becomes my new elevation that I need to level each block to. So I chose one, I leveled it out nicely, and then I just go block by block. So I take the next block out, I re-level the area underneath it, I put my torpedo level on it, front to back, left to right, making sure it's level, adding material as needed to get to the right level. Now this is just a simple lift and relay of this fire pit. They've had this installed for more than 10 years, and with the amount that it shifted, they're happy to just have it re-leveled as is. If I was to do this from scratch, I would probably want a new base under it. It is stone dust underneath. Everyone knows how much I hate stone dust. But that being said, it was just completely out of the budget for this client to have this base replaced, as well as we are actually pressure washing and replacing the polymeric sand of the patio surrounding it in the pool. So there's quite a bit going on already with this project. They just need this leveled nicely, looking as good as possible. So that is our solution for this client to meet their budget, as opposed to actually doing it with a new base. So we're going through each block and tightening up those joints. So you can see when we finally get to the point where we are putting this back together, there are no gaps within those joints. And once we have that initial course set, the next course is nice and easy. We just want to brush off the dust or any remaining gravel and put the next course on, of course staggering those joints. So you can see we have about 1/3 to 1/2 offset of those joints, which is what gives us our strength with this fire pit. You can see the glue that comes off. It will peel off some of that block as long as it's a good adhesive. Hopefully you have a good adhesive that it would do this. So you know they use the good adhesive here. It's flexible too, to be able to flex with any of the movement that a block wall or fire pit structure will experience. And then we just try to get as much of that glue off as possible. Luckily, and how I always quote things, is that it's not glued from layer to layer, course to course. It shouldn't be. Sometimes it is, and that's a huge pain. But only the caps were glued, and we're just trying to get as much of that glue off as possible to have a consistent surface there. And obviously we're gonna have to fix some of this to be able to get a consistent surface, but that comes with the gluing. About as good as you can get there. That took us about 1.5 hours. Prying up these one by one, very slowly with a hammer and chisel, just getting a chisel under there. The good thing is these are antiqued, or at least very old, that they are already chipped. So any minor chips that we put in them is not a huge deal. We can only ever get this back to what it looked like when it was initially installed. So it's always important to tell the client that, make sure that they understand that, as well as if these were in perfect condition, that, you know what, we might get some chips under it, especially when it is glued properly. Trying to pry open the cap from the block, it may cause minor chips in the bottom. Just something to consider, and you might even need to get just new caps if the client doesn't like the look of the chips in it. Luckily, this is a antique fire pit, so that's not a huge deal. So pry these out, get this off. They're actually flipped upside down. The locking mechanism is pointing downward, and that's just because these are smooth caps even on the bottom, so they don't have a locking mechanism on them, so we glue them. Anyways, we always glue caps, and then we're just leveling out the bottom. Obviously that moved enough that this required it, so remove one at a time, level it out, put it back on, put our torpedo level on it, level it front to back, left to right, and then block to block, continuing through. And then the next course is nice and easy. Just put that on top, give it a good leaf blow wipe, make sure that it is nice and clean when you place that next block on, and then the caps just getting a nice little overhang, consistent throughout, adjusting those as necessary. And then the last thing that we'll do is, you can see that there's inconsistencies from one block to the next with the cap, but when we glue them, we'll just make sure that they are glued properly, that we're getting a smooth, consistent surface there. Obviously, some things that I would do differently if I was installing this from the beginning, including I wouldn't even use this block personally, but you can see that they even shaved off. They cut the nose off of each of these. At least the cuts are fairly consistent, but they're not the greatest looking cuts. But we do with it what we possibly can, and we work within the limits. It can only look as good as how it was initially installed. We've gone ahead and scraped the glue off of the top caps, so they're nice and flat. Now there's going to be some inconsistencies with this, especially because you can never get it back to perfect. So we, once again, if you saw our caps when it was completed before we adhered them, there was some inconsistencies in height. And what we do in that situation is when we're gluing them, we're adding a little bit of shims here and there. And for shims for this, I'm basically just using the thinnest pieces of the existing or the old glue to be able to shim these pieces up, get them to the height that I need them to be. And it's very minor. There aren't many that I'm actually shimming, but like I said, there are minor inconsistencies. I'm talking about less than 1/8 of an inch that we may be off by just with what we're working with this block. By doing so, we're getting these caps nice and tight fit, perfect for the client for what they're looking for with this. And we're going through block by block, piece by piece, and then at the end, we just want to make a consistent overhang throughout the fire pit. So we might adjust these as we go around and making sure that we've got a nice consistent overhang throughout this fire feature. And that is that with that fire feature. We leveled out the caps, we shimmed it with the little chunks of old glue, and now it's glued and it's just gonna sit and cure, and we'll be good. There's an access hatch here that this block is actually a half block that slides out, so we got that nice and tight. Got the caps as tight as possible. It all just depends on how well the original person cut it. So we're always telling that to the client. Whenever we're doing just like a lift and relay, it will never look better than what it was when it was first installed. So it's just something to cover. And then we make sure that each of these caps are nice and level all across, at least as good as it could possibly be. And that's the end of our lift and relay of a fire feature. Hey, I hope this video's helped you in some way. If it has, please give this video a like, comment below any questions that you may have, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more hardscaping content like this. Thank you so much for watching.